Welcome back to Coffee and Conspiracies
with Ellie
and Riley.
This is a podcast about conspiracy theories and coffee recommendations.
My coffee recommendation for this episode is the peppermint mocha latte.
And my recommendation is a strawberry acai refresher with raspberry. On this episode, we will be covering the infamous Zodiac killer cold case.
The Zodiac killer cold case is one of the most infamous unsolved murder cases in American history. The serial killer used the pseudonym Zodiac Killer during their crimes in the late 1960s. They are believed to have killed at least 5 people in Northern California. This case inspired the 2007 Netflix movie Zodiac, which was based on the true story. The first confirmed Zodiac killings were the deaths of Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday. In December of 1968, the high school-aged couple was shot to death near their car on Lake Herman Road in Valencia, California. They were found around 11 p.m. that same night by a nearby resident. It's believed that another car had been present at the turnout around the same time the couple was there. This person may have ordered the couple out of the car. It appeared that Betty had exited the car first, but when David had begun to exit the car, he was shot in the head. Betty's body was found several feet away from the car, leading investigators to the conclusion that she had been shot as she fled the scene. The second set of Zodiac killings occurred in Blue Rock Springs Park in 1969. Darlene Farron and Michael Magoo were sitting in the Blue Rock Springs parking lot on the night of July 4th when they noticed a second car pulling into the lot. This car parked beside them, quickly drove away, and returned 10 minutes later to park directly behind them. The driver of this mysterious car approached the passenger side of Darlene and Michael's car with a flashlight and pistol. The driver proceeded to fire into the car, hitting both Darlene and Michael. Later that night, the police received a call reporting this crime. The caller took responsibility for the killings and also claimed to be responsible for the killings of Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday the year before. The call was traced to a nearby gas station phone booth. Upon receiving the call, police hurried to the scene. Darlene was declared dead upon arrival at the hospital, but Michael survived despite his extensive injuries. Michael provided police with a description of the attacker, saying that the attacker was a white male with short brown hair, most likely in his late 20s. The third Zodiac killer crime also occurred in 1969 at Lake Berryessa. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were having a picnic on the water when they noticed a strange man. The man was wearing a black executioner hood with sunglasses, which included what came to be known as the signature Zodiac killer logo of a cross circle. The man approached them with a gun, claiming to be an escaped convict from a nearby prison. The man told the couple that he had escaped after killing a prison guard and stealing a car. He asked Brian for his keys and money before instructing Cecilia to tie Brian up with pieces of plastic clothesline he had brought with him. After Cecilia had tied up Brian, the man proceeded to tie Cecilia and stab both individuals repeatedly. Brian suffered 6 wounds and Cecilia suffered 10. Both Brian and Cecilia were taken to a nearby hospital after a man fishing discovered the couple and contacted park rangers for assistance. Cecilia was conscious when investigators arrived and provided a description of the attacker. While Brian survived the attack and was able to tell his story to the press, Cecilia fell into a coma upon arrival at the hospital and never recovered. Upon further investigation into the crime scene, police found that the killer had left writing on Brian's car door. The killer had drawn the cross circle symbol and left the dates of his past killings. Similarly to the Blue Rock Springs Park killings, the police received a call from a nearby payphone. The caller reported a double murder before confessing to the crime and hanging up. The last confirmed Zodiac killer murder happened just weeks after the attacks on Brian and Cecilia. On October 11th of 1969, cab driver Paul Stein picked up a white male passenger. The passenger requested to be driven from Union Square to Presidio Heights, about a 15-minute drive. Upon arriving at the destination, the passenger shot Paul Stein in the head, took his keys and wallet and part of his bloodied shirt before exiting the cab. The killer then proceeded to wipe down the cab before heading down the street. 3 teenagers witnessed this attack from across the street and quickly called police. The witnesses described the attacker as a 5'8" man in his late 20s with a crew cut. However, the police radio dispatcher told officers to be on the lookout for a black man. This mix-up in descriptions has never been explained, but this greatly hindered the possibility of catching the killer. This incident is often noted as the best opportunity to have caught the killer if it weren't for the mix-up in descriptions. While the murder of Paul Stine was initially thought to be a robbery gone wrong, it was quickly confirmed as a Zodiac killing when the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from the killer with evidence. The letter not only claimed credit for Paul Stine's killing, but included the piece of his bloody shirt that the killer had taken from the scene. While the Zodiac killer's crimes have only been confirmed in these instances, there are several other suspected Zodiac victims. One of the most commonly discussed is the death of Sherry Jo Bates, which occurred before all of the Zodiac's confirmed killings. Sherry was a student at Riverside City College. On the night of October 30th, 1966, Sherry spent her time in the school library. After the realization that she had not returned home the next morning, her father called authorities. Sherry's body was found a short distance from the library with visible stab wounds. The wires in her car had been pulled out, and a man's watch was found on the scene. A month after this incident, the local police and newspaper received identical letters that confessed to the murder of Sherry Bates and warned that she would not be the last. The connection between the Zodiac and Sherry Bates has never been confirmed, but it is greatly speculated that they are related. Sherry Bates is the most discussed possible Zodiac victim, but there were many others during the late 60s and early 70s that have never been investigated further. Throughout the Zodiac killer's career, he wrote several letters that were sent to multiple newspapers. These letters usually began with "This is the Zodiac speaking" and included threats, coded messages, and hints at the identity of the killer. The first set of letters was sent in August of 1969 after the Blue Rock Springs attacks but before the Lake Berryessa attacks. This first set included 3 letters that were each sent to a Bay Area newspaper. The writer of these letters took responsibility for the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs murders, and each letter included a cryptogram which was supposed to reveal the killer's identity. The writer demanded each letter be printed on the 3 front pages of the newspapers, or they would continue their killing spree. Once the letters were printed for the public to see, it was determined that the 3 letters were actually part of a 3-piece puzzle. When put together, the letters were decoded by a pair of local citizens to reveal a message stating, "I like killing people because it is so much fun," and continuing on in more detail. The second time the Zodiac killer sent a letter was in October of 1969. In this letter, he threatened to kill children on a school bus, however, these threats were never acted upon. A few days later, the Zodiac killer called the Oakland police station and demanded that one of their lawyers, Melvin Belly, appear in a local talk show. The local talk show, AM San Francisco, allowed viewers to call in while filming. Someone claiming to be the Zodiac killer called in several times, but stated that they would not reveal their identity. They then requested to meet up with the lawyer, but never showed up to the meeting place. This call was later traced back to a patient in a mental institution, and all connections with the Zodiac killer were disproved. The next month, the Zodiac killer sent 2 letters. The first contained another cryptogram, which wasn't decoded until 2020. In this letter, the killer states that it was not him who called into the radio show, but it provided no new details to his identity. "I hope you're having fun trying to catch me," was stated at the end of the letter. The second letter was mailed shortly after the first. This letter was 7 pages long and described his interactions with police officers after killing cab driver Paul Stine. The killer stated that he had had a close run-in with the police, but because they were looking for a black male instead, he was never stopped or questioned. In December of 1969, the lawyer who had appeared on the talk show received a letter from the Zodiac killer. In this letter, the killer asked Melvin Belly to help him overcome his mental issues before he could claim another victim. The Zodiac killer continued his communication through letters during 1970. In April, he sent 2 letters to authorities and local newspapers. The first included a coded message that began with, "My name is blank," but it was never solved. Both letters included diagrams to bombs that he claimed he would use to blow up school buses. Other letters that include his now signature cross-circle symbol were sent to the Chronicle newspaper, but revealed no new leads. In October, a Chronicle newspaper reporter, Paul Avery, received a letter from the Zodiac with his symbol. This letter hinted at the Zodiac's involvement in the Sherry Bates murder. The final Zodiac letter was sent to the Chronicle newspaper in January of 1974. This letter referred to The Exorcist as the best satirical comedy movie and ended with a score, Me 37, San Francisco Police Department 0. There are many different theories on who the Zodiac Killer may be. However, there are a few names that seem to appear again and again when the case is discussed. The first and most popular is a man named Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur Lee Allen had been at the scene of the Lake Berryessa attacks in 1969. He told his family that he was going scuba diving and returned home with bloody clothes. A few years later, one of his friends reported him to police for saying that he had a desire to kill people and for referring to himself as the Zodiac. Arthur had been dishonorably discharged from the Navy in 1958 and was also fired from his job as a schoolteacher due to sexual misconduct allegations. In 1974, the same year that the Zodiac sent his last letter, Arthur went to jail for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old boy. Many people point to this as a direct connection between Arthur and the Zodiac because Arthur went to jail at the same time the Zodiac letters and crimes took a pause. The police searched Arthur's home several times, during which they found multiple bomb diagrams. Despite all of these signs pointing at Arthur, the DNA evidence and handwriting samples taken from him were never a direct match to that of the Zodiac. The second is a man named Earl Van Best Jr. In 2014, Earl Van Best's son, Gary Stewart, released a book detailing why he believed his father to be the Zodiac Killer. The book stated that Earl fit the composite sketch almost perfectly, and he had lived in California at the time of the killings. Earl was also extremely interested in ciphers, similar to those included in the Zodiac letters. Gary also believed that his father may have held a grudge against Paul Avery, the Chronicle newspaper reporter, who was a target of a Zodiac letter. Gary believed that Earl had disliked Paul Avery because he had reported on Earl's previous arrest on charges of sexual assault. Additionally, when handwriting tests were run, Earl's handwriting was very similar to the Zodiac's. This book gained great publicity and raised the question of Earl's connection to the Zodiac crimes. However, experts tend to believe that most of Gary's claims are conspiracy-based and lack hard evidence. In October of 2021, a group of unofficial cold case investigators claimed to have uncovered the Zodiac Killer's identity. This group, called the Casebreakers, identified the Zodiac Killer as a man named Gary Francis Post, who had passed away in 2018. The team claimed to have found forensic evidence to back up this claim. They noted that the scars on Gary's forehead matched the scars on the sketch of the Zodiac Killer. When putting Gary's full name in the coded message from a previous Zodiac letter, the code was able to be solved. While many people agree with the Casebreakers, many are skeptical of their circumstantial evidence. The police never confirmed this theory, and the case of the Zodiac Killer still remains open today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coffee and Conspiracies with Ellie and Riley. We hope you found a new case to keep on your mind and a new coffee to try.
Come back for the next episode for another conspiracy or cold case that will keep you up at night.